Okay, we're live. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another LinkedIn live session with Netguru. I'm going to be hosting the show today. My name's Sean O'Connor, and you may be wondering to yourself why we're coming to you on a Thursday instead of the usual Tuesday weekly format. And that is because Netguru have released our own Buy Now, Pay Later report. You may have seen it on LinkedIn, on coming across you on the internet, and essentially we wanted to do a little show today and interview one of our experts within Netguru on the topic of Buy Now, Pay Later. So let me just give you a little bit of a quick introduction into the market. So Buy Now, Pay Later has grown massively recently, and there's now more than 170 companies on the market with new kind of solutions emerging every single month. And by 2025, the worldwide Buy Now, Pay Later transaction values is expected to exceed over $258 billion. That's billion with a B and not an M, which is absolutely incredible. And so this is why there's been such a growth in this market recently. There's a lot of new players, and we're going to discuss the ins and outs of it today with my colleague, Paweł Stężycki. Hey, Paweł, how are you doing?
Hi, Sean. Great to be here with you. Hello, everyone.
Good. Paweł, I love that you're sporting the Movember look still, given that it's December now. I had to shave mine as soon as possible because I didn't look too great, but it really suits you.
Cool. I kind of forgot it's already December. It's so much work. Thanks for reminding me.
Busy. Yeah. So after the show, we'll go shave it off. Cool, Paweł. So for the audience, anyone who's listening today who isn't aware of yourself or your background or anything like that, maybe we can start with a little introduction into your past, right?
Sure, makes sense. So I've been working in financial innovation for 10 years or so, mostly with big banks, with innovation labs, these big companies such as Citi or most of the banks right now set up teams of people trying to experiment with new ideas, look out for trends, prototype. And I mean, banks do basically same things as everyone else, with probably one acceptance that they're reluctant to implement them. There's a number of reasons to that, but there are much more good ideas prototyped and tested inside big banks than we see being developed. And I was managing teams of people experimenting with these new ideas in blockchain, in retail banking, in connecting gaming with banking, and so on. And actually, the things that we see on the markets right now, more usually developed by fintechs, are things that big banks have been testing for some time. But as I mentioned, there are a number of reasons why they are a bit reluctant into choosing these solutions instead of the solutions that are probably a bit safer and better in short term. I've been working on fintech innovation and banking innovation for a decade right now.
Nice. So definitely a good person to have on the show today with us. Cool. So we're going to give you a kind of brief overview of the show and what we plan to talk about. So essentially, this is going to be about the current state of the Buy Now, Pay Later market, the kind of evolution of this service over the past 3 to 5 years. Possible future scenarios maybe for Buy Now, Pay Later, and some of the challenges and what I consider to be like the dark side of Buy Now, Pay Later, which I'm sure is of interest to most people as well.
Yeah, just a quick comment there. We can also consider this Buy Now, Pay Later as just one of the examples of this fintech disruption that we have, because it turned out it grew incredibly this year. And that's why we focus on that in our report, and we worked into looking into that area of this fintech industry. But there are more. I mean, next year there's going to be something else, and then in 2 years' time there's going to be something else that's become hugely popular. But this dynamics of some areas of financial services becoming very valuable for the market and very effective attracting users is something we'll see on and on again. So we're talking about buy now, pay later today, but in a bigger picture is how these disruptions in fintech will transform financial industry.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's nice that we have like our ongoing topic of disruption at Netguru, because it's quite a hot word in the fintech market, and the disruption usually comes with, okay, how can we develop something that interrupts the kind of usual flow of like banking or financial services, and how can we attract like a large number of users to be able to use that service? So definitely agree with you there. I see we've got like a ton of people watching today, which is really, really exciting. So yeah, if you're watching, smash on the like button on LinkedIn. Let's give as much visibility to people on LinkedIn to come join the show. And of course, feel free to ask any questions. So a little later on, we'll open up some questions to Paweł from the varying audiences of LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, etc. Perfect. So let's start then with the kind of buy now, pay later as a general. Can you give like your understanding or explanation of what you believe buy now, pay later is?
It's a good question, because we have a current understanding of buy now, pay later, and we have basically the solution, the concept of the product that has been around for way longer. So current understanding, it's pretty much defined by Klarna. Its ability to postpone some of your payments and split it in time, so with no interest rate. So it makes sense in a way that doesn't cost you anything in most cases to pay later. And it's great for e-commerce, where you need to wait a couple of days to get products to send over to you, and then you can send them back basically if you don't like that. And with buy now, pay later, it turned out it's a perfect method of payment for people buying online right now, because they can buy, wait till the product is delivered, and then cover most of the costs of that payment. But in a more broad concept, it isn't something new, right? We can probably recall histories of like people buying things in these local stores centuries back, and putting that on the book, and then paying later when the money is there. And in some geographies, especially in South America, it is common to have the payments, in retail split. We have consumer loans we have been using, for instance, buying, TVs, cars, and stuff like that. So some form of installments. But the big change that we have with buy now, pay later is the ease of use, the user experience. It's just basically one click and you can postpone the payment. So I would say it's about this ability to put away this unpleasant fact that some money will be taken away from your account, and giving yourself some time and to test the product.
Yeah, it's kind of like the displacement of credit, right? So I think what's boosted it recently so much is that people get to that kind of till, like the e-till situation online on the e-commerce stores, and it's an additional point to be able to just buy a product that maybe is like either a little bit out of the price range. It's the ability to get that product now, and it's very easy to just click, in. It's very different to, like a financing option from a bank, for example, where you'd go in, you'd apply, you'd get results, etc. So I guess like the evolution in the market is turned into this like one-click approach at the till.
Yeah, plus I'm glad you're mentioning it, because we still don't have much research in terms of science and psychology, what's happening in people's brains when they use buy now, pay later. But traditionally, you had that all in the same moment, like the decision. When you were going to the store to buy some products, you would make the decision there, take the product, have this unpleasant moment of taking money out of your wallet and leaving the money in the store, and then taking out the product to test it. And now so this would be in the same time some positive emotions, because you're happy that you have chosen something you enjoy, and you're excited to test it as soon as possible. And then there is this unpleasant fact that your banking account will be deduced, and perhaps it is going to be challenging to meet at the end of the month. You may have a more challenging time doing your spending. But now it's split, right? So these emotions are at different moments in time. And I'm wondering how this will impact our purchase process, decision process, emotions, and we'll see probably in a couple of months some good research considering habits that buy now pay later creates. Is it good for your healthy approach to your spend and finance?
Yeah, I think it's nice to see your innovation background kicking in there, because you're not just thinking about how the product would work and how to disrupt the market, but okay, what's the psychology of the user behavior behind the journey of buy now pay later, as opposed to regularly purchasing something online or at a store. And I think that I want to talk about it later in the episode as the dark side of buy now pay later, but there is this kind of initial excitement that you can get of buy now pay later, where you're achieving the goal of purchasing something but without the initial huge outlay of the cost. But then are you essentially subconsciously putting that aside, or are people being smart with it and okay, I need to pay $30 next month, $30 the month after that, so I'm going to make sure that I put that $30 away to cover it? Or are people going to just forget about it and then they're getting accumulatory debt that needs to be paid off? So it's interesting that you're looking at the psychology. I want to talk about that, the kind of dark side of buy now pay later on in the episode. Okay, so it's obviously been booming recently, right? You've seen a whole host of new buy now pay later services. It's even started entering a lot of the regions in the MENA region, where they were very typically pay for everything up front, never take debt where you can, and that's now starting to become a huge kind of growth area for them as well. So why do you think the industry is booming so much?
Yeah, that's probably even more interesting than psychology, because for the last 10 years I haven't seen such a hype in finance. And so many big companies entering a market so fast, because if you look at DeFi, decentralized finance, cryptocurrencies, it has taken years to evolve, and big players were reluctant to go into that, right, at the beginning. It's obviously changing right now, but with buy now pay later, we see really incredible traction. It's almost like FOMO, fear of missing out, by big companies. This week, I think it was the day before yesterday, Microsoft announced they're introducing buy now pay later into their browser. So with Edge browser, you'll be able to basically split your online purchase into buy now pay later installments. So it's not only that big banks are doing that, big banks on the planet are now rushing to redesign they have their patterns of granting people with credit, basically usually based on credit cards, for instance, and now they're redesigning it to wrap it in something which is more like a buy now pay later. So we have Citi, we have in Australia working on that. We have
Afterpay, is it?
Yeah, someone is working with Afterpay. We have banks in the US doing that. we have PayPal and we have Square buying big companies and entering partnership with buy now, pay later companies to add that to their portfolio. So it's crazy, right? And it boosts market valuations of these buy now, pay later companies to incredible level. I mean, there have been falling for last month, so they're not at their all-time high right now. But still, companies which are very early on in the process of building their position are valued into billions, tens of billions of dollars with no profits so far. And there's going to be a pushback. We're seeing that in Australia, where these valuations are have been dropping because there's still many risks and many questions on the way before these companies will become more mature. Klarna is probably the most mature, but we won't see 20 Klarnas on the planet. Right? There's going to be like maybe 3 Klarnas. So it's kind of I don't have a good answer to that question. Why there's so much excitement among those rational players, big companies, spending tens of billions of dollars on buy now, pay later. Maybe they're right. Maybe it's the future, and it's gonna transform banking and finance in a way that we cannot expect. Or maybe they're overexcited.
Yeah, it's funny because like you usually consider pre-revenue companies to have such large valuations because of what they can achieve when they reach like critical mass, and those achievements usually come in the form of like advertising, right? So it's like free platform, get your users, expand massively, and then we start to implement advertising. People pay, but I don't see the opportunity massively for advertising at checkout, right? Once you're clicking on when you're in the buying process. So the thing for me is like where do they earn the money to take them from like massive valuation pre-revenue companies into like profitable businesses?
Yeah, I would probably, and we write about it in our report, point out to Klarna and how they transform their model, because they started obviously with checkout. Klarna has been around for a decade or so, and they started with payments and checkout. But then they noticed that splitting payment into 3 or 4 is effective in a way that people tend to put more things in the basket, and they were able to charge merchants for that, for the bigger baskets, right? And then they noticed there's another step they can make. They started developing their shopping app around e-commerce, and mostly buying fashion, clothes, and stuff like that. And probably their next step can be like a super app that attracts people who look for clothing, and they will start their journey in Klarna's app. So it will not that much be an buy now, pay later provider. It's going to be shopping integrator for clothing, fashion.
Interesting.
And they have increasing number of arguments. Reasons why you may like to use Klarna's app to do your shopping and track the prices of the clothes you like. And probably at some point they're gonna improve their AI. So, for instance, I can imagine that you like one piece of clothes in this expensive, delivered by this expensive brand, but there's the Klarna's AI that tells you, hey, maybe you can choose from Agent M's offer something that looks pretty much the same, and it's like, I don't know, 25% of the price of the brand you like. So if you think of it, the ultimate goal and the price can be huge if they become a shopping partner, assistant for millions of people. That can be huge, right? So I believe that's the end game that the market is expecting. It's not just buy now, pay later. It's going to be shopping, and it's going to be probably more financial products, and maybe you'll set up a banking account and you already have virtual cards. And maybe like if you're buying with Klarna today and you're 25, maybe in years old, and well, who knows, maybe in 10 years time you'll go for Klarna's mortgage products or Klarna's investment products. Hard to say.
It's an interesting take, and actually, I the first bit you talked about, the till is something that I hadn't considered, as in like getting their money from the merchant rather than from the consumer. And I think everyone wants to use products and platforms that give them like the easiest use of whatever they want to do. So like we're inherently becoming a lazier nation. So aggregator apps in all forms, whether it be retail or whether it be banking or whether it be, healthcare, whatever, there's a number of different options there. But I think this aggregator approach is becoming like the popular play for a lot of people and entering into like a certain market. So the question is like, if Klarna becomes an aggregator app for retailers and Afterpay becomes an aggregator app for retailers and Zilch become an aggregator app, who then designs the aggregator app to aggregate the aggregator app? It becomes a bit of like an inception, right? That's how markets tend to evolve at the moment.
That's true. I mean, clothing industry is incredible. I'm not getting it fully, understanding it, but basically you can get pretty similar products on different prices depending on branding, and being able to deliver that offer and convincing a customer that he may like to buy this instead of that, it's all pretty critical there, because like the t-shirts are not that expensive to make, no matter if they cost you $100 or.
Oh, still there? I thought I lost you, but I could see you back. Okay, so yeah, that's interesting. I think you touched previously on the kind of slight drop this year with buy now pay later valuations, especially in Australia, but also we've noticed it in Europe as well. So, do you think that the attention that this market has been getting means that we know now that regulators are starting to step in and get involved and putting warnings on taking these like line of credits? Do you think that interference or that introduction of regulators into this market is causing that drop?
Well, it's to some extent similar pattern that you see with all new concepts and ideas. There tend to be overhyped. I mean, there's too much excitement related to them at the beginnings. They grow fast, and then they drop in terms of value, and it then takes some more time to build it in a way that it's sustainable growth. But it doesn't matter that much right now, because we had so much money being poured into these companies like Klarna or Afterpay or the biggest ones, and they have to grow. They are employing best talents on the planet, and these people will work over next months to build something better, and this will be a great solution. And it doesn't really matter if a firm is priced at, I think their all-time high was $165 a few months back. Now it's like more 130, or if it's going to be $50, it doesn't matter in the short term, because they got so much money. They have to get best talents and best people and work on new ideas. Same as Revolut some few years back. I mean, Revolut initially was a really simple concept, FX exchange and ability to withdraw money from ATMs with no fees. And now it's a super app, right? Because they were able to attract new people and force the solution to grow. So we'll see.
Into travel.
Yeah, and we'll see pushback from regulators. We'll see pushback from fraudsters. I mean, it seems that there's something worrying what happened in Australia. I looked at the results, and there are challenges to tackle in terms of, for instance, being able to blacklist people who would try to leverage the high number of buy now pay later companies. If you're not repaying your loans, you can, and there's number of companies offering that solution. You can go around and take loans from next and the next year buy now pay later companies. So one person can make lots of harm operating like that if there is no universal blacklisting, and there's no such thing. There wasn't time to do this as far as I know. So there's going to be a pushback, and it's going to grow in a more stable way.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just looking at some of the questions that are coming in. So just before we ask one of the questions, there's a comment actually from one of your colleagues in the innovation team, Krishek, and he's put, when it comes to cost, similarly to 0% installments, I'd say it is embedded in the price of the product. Just like with all loans, it's all about being in control of it. If you use it wisely, it is a great solution, but it comes with big temptations. And this is referring to this kind of the dark side of buy now pay later that we want to talk about. And so no better time than now. So thanks for the comments there, Krishek. So the dark side of buy now pay later, and this is about the education of what this product is, because famously it wasn't kind of conveyed as another credit line or another lending service. It kind of felt easy to do, and people who weren't educated on the product were leaving themselves in kind of debt spirals based on like a misunderstanding of the service. So do you see that? I know that Klarna and Afterpay, they put a lot of effort into making it clear, like when you're buying, what exactly they're offering to you as a consumer. Do you think that we're going to see like an improvement in this area, or is it still going to become quite costly for a lot of people on the market?
Well, I'm sure they're going to put more emphasis and more effort to communicate the risks, and it's going to be more transparent. Possibly there's going to be also more effort. It won't be that seamless, because some new regulations may take place that will require additional, background checks or something like that. And so it may be a little more difficult to apply for these. But on the other hand, I wouldn't say that this spiral of debt is the most worrying and more risky factor here, because we're not talking about large amounts of money. I would say that building unhealthy habits can be a better, more of a problem, especially if we imagine, I don't want to sound like old person trying to teach young people how they will behave, but I will do that. We learn new patterns each day and each week and each month, and once we have these new patterns, we tend to stick to them. Unless something disturbs us, right? And at the beginning of your journey with finance, this is the special moment when we build these new habits, right? So you're around 18 usually, and you have this ability to act as your own, to manage your own wealth, and you can take loans, and you're building your new habits. So something that I would worry about is that this fact of paying for things that we use will be disconnected from the moment we decide to buy things, right? And we'll feel that we can always have some additional credit, or paying is not connected with the fact of taking ownership. and I'm not sure if it's healthy habit.
Yeah, I think there was a show I watched recently about dopamine that you get from kind of notifications on Facebook or receiving like messages on Instagram or receiving likes on a picture. And it says that like as a generation, people are becoming numb to dopamine, or at least that base level of what they require to be happy is growing, right? And they require more and more dopamine to give them that sense of fulfillment. And when you're buying something, obviously there is dopamine attached to the purchase, but it's quite often leveled out with with the output of the money when you're buying that. Do you think that there could be some, like, based on like habits that you were just talking about, people will start to like search for that dopamine hit of the purchase and then never getting the opposite part of that where they're having to outlay the money immediately and they keep chasing that?
It will. I mean, I recall this interview I made years back. We were testing personal finance management tools. You know, the assumption was that people want to have a track of their spending and be able to see what they're spending the money on. And we are presenting the concept and some mock-ups to the lady, and she laughed at us and said, like, I just got these shoes I shouldn't buy. I mean, they were too expensive, but I love them. And the last thing I want to do is to look at the price of these. Like, I already paid for them and I don't want to be reminded. I mean, and if you look at it, it's quite common for people not to think about the things that are not pleasant, and spending money is not pleasant. So, yeah, if we take it away, there's going to be constant flow of dopamine, as I imagine. I mean, referring to what you've been saying.
Yeah.
And there's going to be an awareness of the consequences until some point when, I mean, things can get bad.
Yeah, of course. But like, I don't want to only focus on kind of negative connotations of buy now, pay later, because as a market as well, it's very useful to a lot of people. It allows people a bit more financial freedom if they're, they're sensible, and I presume a large proportion of people are. So like the benefits of giving these people a bit more financial freedom is what I think is like letting these companies thrive a bit more, especially in the growth that they've had.
Yeah, and then this ability to test product and check it out before you pay, it makes sense with e-commerce, right? As buying things online, and why should I pay for something I'm not sure if it's the right size, or I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So before we continue the conversation, I'm going to skip over to I think LinkedIn. Right, we have some questions on there. We start with one of Netguru's core team members, actually, Radek Zaleski, and he asks Paweł, how about 2022? Buy now, pay later is on the rise. Jack Dorsey is going for crypto. That's news if anyone saw it this morning. And in payments, and COVID inspired us to look for new contactless payment products. What do you think will be the top trend next year? I already know my answer to this.
Well, obviously, Jack is not the first one to go into crypto payments. He's, I would say, quite late to the market, if that's about crypto, unless it's about decentralized finance, which it will be hot next year and the year after. And so decentralized finance, but not necessarily in something that we as mainstream consumers are likely to leverage. It's more about wealth management assets, NFTs to some extent, but not necessarily only as related to value of arts. And we'll see more regulation in Europe here from Germany related to the decentralized finance, which is really needed to make sense of it in the long term. So one bet would be decentralized finance, to some extent overlapping with cryptocurrencies as an enabler. And other thing that we're missing on in this discussion, and we haven't touched upon, is sustainability. And actually, buy now, pay later is not necessarily, neither is crypto. There are some controversies about both of them in terms of sustainability. But there's still, at least crypto tokens can also be enablers for sustainability. Mm-hmm. So that's the second bet that we're making here at Netguru. And third one is enabled banking or enabled finance. And we're starting to see some of that because you can... basically, with the technology and solutions we have, we can implement financial and banking features in any apps. Like we can have them in retail apps, buying, shopping apps. We see like Microsoft is integrating buy now, pay later with their browser. So it's an example of a process where non-financial companies outsource technology and legal framework to offer financial and banking services. And that's going to be huge, right? We're going to have super apps built on that. And to be honest, that's something that can transform, whole financial industry, because neither banking nor insurance companies, they don't have the best touch point with the clients, right? Best possible touch points.
Yeah, I'd agree actually with those two. Well, out of the three, I would say embedded finance that you just touched upon there is definitely something I would pad to be one of the top trends for next year. And also Paweł touched on NFTs as well. So currently we understand NFTs to be kind of big digital signatures for the sale of like online art, right? These pictures of monkeys and is it Beeple, this artist creating beautiful pictures online. But on our show last week with Peter Grosskopf, the gent who works in decentralized finance, he was talking about NFTs being used for all sorts of like financial functions in the future. So invoice tracking, like making sure that loans being taken are assigned to one person and credited to that person. And I think that obviously this could also be a huge talking point and a huge trend in 2022 as well.
Yeah, it's going to continue next year, although I think that it's going to take more than 1 year for this to mature. Because as I mentioned, mm-hmm. I don't think that regulators going to act that fast. And, if you think about, for instance, buying an apartment supported by ownership split and in some form of tokens, whether it's going to be NFT or other or different types of tokens, there is a question what will happen in you need to go to court and prove your ownership, and will that court mm-hmm. will have the legal framework to support your claims, right?
Yeah, and as we know, the legal industry is like notoriously slow for being up to date with like technology and using that to their advantage as well.
Yeah, but they're improving. RegTech is growing fast, to be honest. I mean, we'll see more of that type of area, technology and legal getting connected.
Yeah, cool. I look forward to it. We have another question for you, Paweł, here from Paulina, and I didn't get to ask Paulina's question on the last week's episode, so thank you for coming back and asking another question. Paulina asks, what's the role of regulators here? Will they hamper the growth of buy now, pay later, in your opinion? Or will they build the trust that's necessary for the buy now, pay later market?
Yeah, well, they will hamper the growth of buy now, pay later, probably, and there are a couple of reasons to that. It will differ between the countries, the ones which are more liberal and open in terms of, allowing businesses and to do what they want and putting the responsibility on the customer, which probably will be more reluctant to interfere. But in some countries, we'll see probably a lot of engagement. I see this threat that lots of governments will struggle with inflation next year, and they're struggling with it right now. And it will be nice to have someone to blame for it. And buy now, pay later can be one of the things they will blame for inflation, because people are buying more, spending more money, not thinking about that, and that's boosting the inflation. It's easier to take this narrative instead of admit that we're printing too much money and that's the consequence.
Been doing that for too many decades now. Okay, perfect. Thanks, Paulina. I appreciate that. Sebastião asks on LinkedIn, to what degree buy now or pay later is expected to impact consumerism?
Okay, so if I'm understanding that right, it's going to boost consumption, right? In some areas, it's not an easy question because I don't have a good research for that. We should have data to fall back on and to see, for instance, if people who are using, who started using buy now, pay later are spending more on consumer goods in a long term. Maybe it's going to be just a short term impact. It seems that it may be it may be a dark side of buy now, pay later, that if it will boost consumerism and people buying more, it's not necessarily good for environment and making factories make more goods that we then buy. So there is this threat. I haven't seen a good data that would confirm that, though.
Okay, that's fair. So I guess, well, in the interest of being on the side of buy now, pay later as well, I like to think that the companies on the market are really trying to actively push the education of the products and the service, so that customers understand the consequences of what they're doing when they use that buy now, pay later service. Because catalogs are essentially what buy now, pay later service were 10, 15 years ago, and they had a fantastic reputation. People loved using them. It was their way of being able to manage like Christmas better, being managed to like heavy birthday periods better, because they could afford to cope with that period of year, and they had the kind of sensible outlay afterwards to make sure that they had stuff ready to pay for that. So I believe that the buy now, pay later companies on the market are going to put a lot of effort and emphasis into educating the consumers to be able to understand what it means to take out buy now, pay later loan.
Yeah, and this is like
loan.
That's true, and plus it's a bit like with the story with the knife. You can use it in a number of ways. You can also use buy now, pay later in a number of ways. I can imagine that you're using it to buy second-hand goods and support circular economy, because there needs to be some transfer of money. So in theory, it can be used also in a good and bad cause, as most of the tools we have. So it's not probably buy now, pay later to blame. It's more what we decide to spend money on.
Yeah, for sure. Okie doke. Got another question, and this comes back from your colleague again, Christoph. So he says there was a 51% increase in the use of buy now, pay later payment methods in Europe during Black Friday, Cyber Week, and Cyber Monday, compared to the previous year, according to data from Molly. Okay, it's not a question. It's another helpful statement. So I guess this is talking about the impact of this kind of Black Friday, Cyber Week, Cyber Monday that we've had recently in the buy now, pay later market as well.
Yeah, but it's also a valid point, because this is one of the key metrics that we will look. I mean, markets will look into us for ability for buy now, pay later to expand and increase. I know that the PayPal, which is one of the most exciting buy now pay later companies in Poland and in Eastern Europe, have been sharing their data, and I think it was way higher than 50%. So it may depend on the market, and the question is which market and at which stage get this maturity. So we'll see that it's not growing anymore, right? So we don't have more users adopting buy now pay later. 51% year to year shows that we're still in a strongly in the growth stage, which is promising for these companies.
For sure. I have a question for myself actually to you, Paweł, and my question is about on-premise purchasing of something, right? So we have like buying at the checkout online. We have the potential of like a super app in the future where you would log into Klarna's app. Where do you see like the role of like the hardware providers, or the POS terminal provider, PDQ providers, in offering like some sort of solution at the checkout in like a shop, for example? So you go to Tesco, let's say, you buy your weekly shop, and it has an automated service on there where you can either pay, and you can click 1 to pay in full, or you click 2 to pay over the next 3 months. And the POS terminals are communicating with the issuing bank and the acquiring bank to say, okay, they've opted for buy now, pay later. Let's implement this in the background while they're choosing to pay a third of it. Do you think that's possible?
I mean, it is possible, and it has been happening. We have more information about that in our report, because we also looked into that. But basically, there are 3 ways of doing it. 2 of them are something that Klarna is into. For instance, not most of these big companies. On one hand, you can integrate with merchants' cashier till system. So you'll be just asked, would you like to pay with buy now, pay later, this and that solution, right? And you can pay it by showing your QR code or something like that. Pretty much the same as you do with a card. On the other hand, there is this workaround when you create virtual cards and you leverage the NFT in your mobile phone. So you can instantly set up a virtual card to pay for the goods that you're buying. And this feature would basically wipe out, the traditional consumer lending that has been done in stores, because everyone will be able to apply for this consumer loan with their buy now, pay later provider or some other company they like to use. And there is the third way, and actually the funny thing about this, it's something that banks have been using for ages, that you can pay with your credit card and then split the payment into installments, right? And banks have been doing it. I mean, I work at Citi, and Citi has been doing that for years. But obviously, with the business model that banks have been focused on, this would lead to interest rates on these installments, because banks were unable to leverage the other business models that Klarna is using, like for instance, I don't know, the data they have, or boosting the size of the basket or something like that. So there are 3 models which you can leverage buying in store. And it's about habits. Your habit has changed from buying with cash to cards to tapping your mobile phone, and it can change in a number of ways in the future.
Interesting. Okie dokie. So we're coming up to the end of the episode now. So if anyone else has any questions, feel free to pop them on LinkedIn, Twitter, anything along those lines. And also, if you're watching and you're interested in reading our report or downloading our report, you can either find that on our website or on some of our LinkedIn pages, or also if you click the little light bulb symbol where you usually like a post on this video, and we'll get someone to connect with you and send over a link for the report to your account as well. So click that now if you want to download the report or view the report from ourselves, and we'll get someone in touch. Okay, so let's talk about the market potential saturation. Do you see that there's space still for buy now, pay laters? Because there seems to be like a buy now, pay later civil war kind of happening where everyone's eating up the free markets that are left. Where do you see that going?
Yeah, I like that comparison, and actually, we in the report we assume 3 scenarios for this market to grow in the future, and they're kind of like pretty like civil war scenarios. One of them, they're like movie type scenarios, because obviously we can either have dominating players on this market taking over other companies and basically becoming future FANGs like Facebook, Amazon, future leaders, which seemed to be more plausible few months back. The competition in this market is becoming really tense. So the bigger the competition, the harder it will be for the leaders to become dominant. Plus there may be, I mean, it's likely there's going to be some, regional differences, with some economies markets being dominated by big companies like Affirm or Klarna in US. But then you can have someone else in the Middle East, which is also, quickly working on buy now, pay later solutions. Some other companies in India. So you'll have these regional powers, I would say, in terms of buy now, pay later. And in some areas, we can have regulators being more strict and limiting the expansion of these companies, and on the others, they can thrive. So, or it can become a total mess with what's happening probably in Australia, with more than 20 companies on not such a large market offering same solution. So it's not possible in the long term that you will see so many small companies, because there won't be enough space for these probably. So it's going to be very dynamic.
A lot of acquisitions and mergers in those markets, right?
Yeah, probably. So, like, if you compare it into, I don't know, Game of Thrones, you'll see different fractions and then kind of partnering with each other and waging war on the other, but probably without an easy scenario for one king to rule them all.
Yeah, and do you think that there's some territories that no one will go for? Because there are particular countries that have a very reluctant mindset to spend beyond what their capabilities are, right? And it's in like, okay, rather than you taking a huge mortgage out on a big house to live luxuriously, it's like, okay, what can I afford now? I'm going to buy with what I can afford. Or do the same with a car. Can I afford a £20,000 car? No. So I'll buy a £5,000 car and then save up until I can afford it. And it's never going beyond their means. And do you think there's research already to show like certain countries who have that kind of mentality, and the buy now, pay later companies just won't bother kind of approaching those markets?
Well, I hope they have good research. I mean, they have tons of money, and really it would be surprising that companies such as Klarna or Affirm wouldn't be able to get their homework done in terms of research and market analysis and experimenting on these markets. So I would assume they do. If they don't, then that would be surprising. Usually, I mean, there's pattern and scenario that we can expect, because we've seen that in the past, that there are high value markets that companies focus on, obviously United States being one. Just look at Klarna. They started in the Nordics, went to Germany, and then they focus on United States, and just now they're expanding elsewhere in Europe, like in Poland, Greece. So probably not priority markets. And we've seen that with payments to some extent years back. So right now you have very saturated market of payment providers in Europe and fintech providers, banking as a service in Europe, United States. But area which seems to be most dynamic is Africa, for instance, because it's not that mature markets. And we probably see that with buy now, pay later, expanding to India, which is big, United Arab Emirates, which is big in terms of value, and some like medium priority markets, where these big players will try to grow.
Yeah, for sure. I think that because of the huge recent boom in smartphone adoption in Africa as well, this could be like an untapped market that is raring to go in so many industries, insurance, payments, buy now, pay later, for example, e-commerce, all these new neobanks popping up left, right, and center in Africa because of this huge smartphone adoption. It unlocks so many possibilities, not just for the consumers, but also for people looking to crack into those markets.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure about BNPL in Africa because there's need to be some it's different story with payments than with lending to some extent. But maybe we need just a few more years. I know probably South America is more likely to be the next hot area for buy now, pay later than Africa.
There we go. Heard it here first. Okie dokie. So also we have people from PayPal, people from Klarna, all sorts of different companies in this space listening today, or at least registered for the event. So Paweł was talking about user research or user testing, like a bit of an understanding. Maybe our moderators can tag Agata or Evelina in the chat, and if anyone's interested in using Netguru to help understand their market better and how to kind of expose their product to the right user groups, then feel free to reach out to them and contact them on your behalf. All right, so we're wrapping up to the end of the session now. Is there anything that you want to talk about that you don't believe we've touched on yet, Paweł, before we wrap up?
Well, probably something we should be aware more in the future is making sure that buy now, pay later doesn't support that consumerism, as someone mentioned, too strongly, and looking into these traps that it can create with people's minds, possibly. Because in general, we should probably be aware that making people buy more, regardless of the consequences, is not the best thing for the planet. So that's something we haven't talked much, and I'm not an expert on that, but I have some in the back of my head that the fact that it can be a challenge.
For sure. Okay, thank you very much for all the information you shared with us today. No more questions that I can see have come in, so I'm happy to wrap the episode up there. Once again, Paweł and the team within Netguru have been working very hard on the release of this buy now, pay later report. You can download it from our website, or there's also a post in the chat comments here as well. We really appreciate everyone tuning in today. Paweł, you've been fantastic. I really appreciate you popping on and having this chat with me.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you for listening to everyone who joined us. And it's been exciting to be able to share those thoughts.
Perfect. Yeah. All right. That's everything today, guys and girls. Tune in on Tuesday for next week's episode of Disruption Talks, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.